Hi friend, come on in. I'm making homemade tortillas today. I love to make homemade tortillas because they just taste so much better than store-bought tortillas. There's a difference in the taste. Plus they're also soft and warm and pillowy. There's just something about them that they just taste better. While they do take a little bit of time to make, they're not hard to make. So come on in and I'll show you how. Okay, so I have a big mixing bowl here. The recipe I'm giving you today can make about 12-ish large, like almost burrito-sized tortillas. So you can scale the dough a little bit to, you can cut it out in smaller pieces or bigger pieces to get bigger or smaller tortillas. But this will give about 12 wraps, which is about what I need for my uses today. So I'm going to start with 3 cups of flour. Yes, I do the shovel and scoop method. It's what I grew up doing. I feel like all of my recipes have been optimized to use that method, and so I don't have any problems with making recipes work. So 3 cups of that. And you know what? If you go a little heavier on the flour, it's fine. You get an extra tortilla, like bonus. Okay, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. I broke out my table salt because my other salt is so coarse that I find it's not dissolving. I think I'm going to need to break out a mortar and pestle and break it up a little bit so that I can use it in my everyday recipes. This next ingredient is optional. Some people use it, some people don't. I have done both and I get good results either way, but it's baking powder. You can put in anywhere from 1 to 2 teaspoons of baking powder. It just kind of depends on how fresh you think your baking powder is. Or skip it. Doesn't matter. I like to put in about a tablespoon of sugar. It just adds a slight little sweetness to it, but it's not overly sweet. Okay, give that a quick little mix. And that is just the base. Now I want to add, and I did this earlier so I wouldn't have to make a big mess, the 3rd cup of lard. You can use other fats, but I think if it is not a solid fat, you need to reduce the amount that you're using. So I am not a tortilla making expert. I have made it with lard because that's what I keep in my house and that's what I like to make pie crust with. So I make my tortillas with it. It's no big problem for me to use lard. You can use butter, coconut oil, I think. You can use like a liquid oil. I think if you're using a liquid oil, you use 1/4 cup instead of the 3rd cup. It does give you a different taste, texture, all that. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. Or if you have a reason to not use lard. Obviously, if you're vegetarian or vegan, that is not an acceptable use for you. So, you can use a different oil. You're just going to have to scale it back a little bit. Okay, so I'm just cutting this in. This is like this stage, it's almost like making biscuits or pie crust or any of those things where you're just cutting your fat into your flour. If you want my pie crust recipe, I've got a really good one. It uses lard. I don't chill anything, and I've never had a problem with not getting flaky pie crust. So I also have a good recipe for a hot water crust. It's a lot stretchier, and this actually reminds me of that hot water crust because the next ingredient is hot water. So it's hot to the touch, but it's not overly hot that I'm going to burn myself when I'm using it. So this is, I actually did 1.25 cups of water. I just eyeballed it. I didn't even really look at the measuring cup, but you're going to need somewhere in that cup range. So it depends if you're in a more humid area or if you're in a drier area, how much flour you're going to need. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but I'm adding the water to where the dry spots are after that initial bowl of water that I just added in. So this is a soft, sticky dough at first. It's not super sticky. If it's really, really sticky, you probably added a little too much water. So mine, that's a bit sticky. I don't know if you can see that. So I may have added just slightly too much water. The more you make it, the more of a feel you'll get for it. I'm going to give this a quick knead in the bowl. See if it needs a little tiny bit of flour to bring it together, but it might be okay, honestly. You want it to be a little on the stickier side. But it's a very It feels very different from working with either a short crust like a biscuit or a, pie crust. It also feels very different than working with bread dough. Okay, let me get this out of the way. Okay, now this comes one of the long parts for this. You gotta knead this for at least 8 minutes, preferably 10. So see how it's kind of a shaggy, sticky dough. So it will clean my hand. It'll take a little bit, but it'll clean my hand. And then it will come together and make a nice smooth dough. It will be nice and silky smooth. So if you've never kneaded before, you kind of turn it in and push with the heel of your hand. Turn, push, turn, push. This is one way. I like to get started this way, but then once I get the dough to come together, maybe it wasn't too much water. Once I can get my hand a little cleaner, I start doing a sort of push and pull, and this just goes not faster per se, but I feel like it just works it a little bit better. So if you have a kneading method that you like to use, just go ahead and use it. It doesn't matter. I'm just shoving my hand in just to get the extra bits of dough off. There we go. So I will see you 8 minutes later. Yeah, there we go. It's nice and pliable. It's been about 8 minutes. So I'm going to call this done. Now I'm going to divide this up and then it needs to sit and rest. So I'm going to get a cookie sheet to put this on so it can rest. And then you need probably about an hour, maybe a little bit more, depending on how long it takes you to roll out and cook them, to do tortillas from start to finish. So I actually like to start mine early in the morning because I'm batch making meals, and so I will use this for batch making meals. Okay, I have a cookie sheet. It's just stained, it's not dirty. I have a scale. I like to scale them out because I like them all to be about the same size. And I'm just going to sort of work out a ball, and then I just pinch it between my finger and thumb and just squeeze it off. So I'm aiming for about 75 grams or so to do sort of the burrito size. If you want bigger ones, so I wrote down some different sizes. So 80 does a large burrito. The 75 I'm doing is slightly less than, mega burrito size, but I find it's a good size with what I'm doing for today. If you do 65 grams, that's sort of a medium tortilla. Then down to 40 grams is like it's not street taco, but it's like taco sized. So I should be able to get about 12 out of this. So again, it depends how much flour I put in and all that. So I'm just going to go through and scale these, and then there's another step before I can cover them and let them rest. Okay, so I did get 12, but I ended up scaling them at 70 grams, and I got one that's a little smaller, but it's okay. It's good for what I need. I probably should have just stuck with the 11, but okay, so I'm going to round these into balls, and then, so I need to round them all into balls before moving on to the next step, because the next step will make my hands all goopy, but the tops do tend to dry a little bit, so you kind of want to move quickly so nothing's drying out too much. I don't know if you have ever balled up dough before, but if you sort of hold your hand in a C shape and just let it stick to the cupboard, it will automatically ball up under your hand. There's also, you can just keep doing the turning it under and just keep going around and around and around until you've got a ball shape, but that doesn't work very well for me. Use what works for you. If you've got a method, just use it. It'll be fine. And sometimes if the top it gets dry, I will turn it to the inside, but I need to turn some of the bottom up to the, what was the bottom now towards what was the top, just so it sticks to the cupboard a little bit and rounds it nicely. If it's sliding on the cupboard, it's just a little too dry. The dough has gotten a little too dry. So I'm almost done. This will need to sit and rest for at least half an hour. That's sort of the minimum is like 20 minutes. It's best if you can let it go for like 45 minutes to an hour. It just kind of depends on what your day is looking like and how quickly you need them. So the next step is a little bit on the messy side. I don't know if you can see. So this is my lard, And I'm just going to take a bit of lard, I'm going to put it in my hands, and I'm just going to roll the ball in my hands. And I want to make sure I have a good amount of lard on the top. So I will pretty much go through, and almost between every ball, just depends on how much I have on my hands, I will put fresh lard on my hands. There you go. This will help prevent it from drying out, but I will still cover this. I will put a piece of plastic wrap on it just to make sure it doesn't dry out. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this section of the wraps. So now they will just sit and rest until I am ready to move on. You don't want them to sit for hours and hours and hours. So definitely try to get to them sooner rather than later, but they can sit for a chunk of time. I have let them sit for, I think, up to an hour and a half to 2 hours, and they've been okay. But as long as they are well covered in lard and well covered with plastic wrap, they will not dry out. Oops, that might be a little more lard than I needed. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to get that covered in plastic wrap, and I will see you in about half an hour, maybe a little bit longer. We'll see. So I will be rolling out the burritos, but I wanted to show you my setup. So this is it's an electric griddle. It's like a 17-inch, I think. This works really well for making tortillas. If you have a cast iron frying pan, one of the large ones, those work well too, but I do find with the deep sides, it's kind of hard to flip the tortillas without using a spatula of some sort, and then it kind of digs in a little bit. On the side shelf here, I just have a tea towel, and I will be placing another tea towel over top of it. So as I place the burritos down, I will be keeping them covered with another tea towel. So this is just the basic setup of how I'll be cooking them. I currently have this preheated to about 410-ish. You know, it's going to start off it'll feel like it's not hot enough at first, but I'll start, making the temperature go down as I get cooking, because it will get hotter and hotter as time passes, especially when you're using a cast iron pan on the stove. I find that it just gets hot and then it just stays hot and you risk burning it. So I start like on a medium high heat, and then I just slowly step the heat down until I'm like around a medium, sometimes even a medium low. With cast iron, that stuff gets hot. Okay, so my tortillas have been resting for a while now, probably a good 40 to 50 minutes, almost an hour, I think. So I'm going to mostly keep them covered, but I'm just going to lift up one corner and then just grab the one I need. Now, this is sort of how I learned to do it. I'm going to have a bucket with some flour in it, and I'm just going to press it into the flour, shake off the extra. I'm going to flour my work surface and keep it liberally floured. That's just the way I roll. I like to liberally flour it until right near the end, when you kind of want it to stick a little to the counter, and it gives you that extra little rollout. Now, I'm sort of rolling it between my fingers and thumb and just squishing it, but I'm leaving a bit of a thicker edge here. I think it helps roll it out a little more evenly. You're not going to get even circles. It just seems like that's just the way it works, is even circles are really hard to get. I do find if you end up with a square, if you roll out from the corners of the square, it does make a more round shape. I don't know how it works, but it does actually sort of round it out a bit more. So I'm going to show you a couple of them rolled out. I'll probably speed through after this first one. So I'll yak through this first one, and then you can watch a second one. And then I will show you how they cook up on the griddle. So see how it's starting to form a bit of a square? If you kind of roll out from the center to the corners, it makes a circle. I don't know how, but it makes a circle. If you feel like it's sticking, just go ahead, add more flour, and always shake off a little bit of the extra before you put it on the griddle, or you can just brush it off with your hands. Once I start getting a little bit bigger, I do start rolling out from the center to the edges, because otherwise you kind of get weird things. It sticks in some spots and then not in others, and then it makes weird shapes. So I pretty much want this to be, I don't know if you can see my counter through the wrap, but that's probably about where I want it. Maybe just a slight bit bigger, but there we go. So I can brush off a little bit of the extra flour, and then this will go right on the griddle, and it will start cooking. So while that one's cooking, I will start another one. So it's just a lather, rinse, repeat until I've gone through all 12. Now, the only problem with my particular setup is the griddle is behind me, and so I do have to sort of, turn around and look behind me to make sure it's not burning or getting overdone. It's not something that I can just look off to my side and, oh, I got to turn it. So I do need to make an effort to remember to go and look. And like I said, if you've got cast iron, just do it in cast iron. Okay, just turned it. So that should give you an idea of how long. It's really, it doesn't take long per side. And I do find if I slightly undercook it, it will finish cooking in the, the pile of dishcloths, because it'll sort of keep steaming itself. Okay, I get a few wrinkles. It happens. There we go. Okay, so I flipped it again, and I moved it to the other side of the griddle, and then this one's going to go where the other one was. So I do kind of assembly line it a little bit. So I will get this one started, and then I will move the camera and show you how they cook up, and you can sort of watch them do their little poofy thing. So I'm looking for a bunch of little bubbles, and then once I see that it's sort of covered in bubbles, I'll go ahead and flip it. And I want a little bit of browning on the bottom, so I literally just turned this down a little bit, so I probably could have left it a little bit longer, but I'm going to wait for this side to sort of start puffing up as well, and then I'll flip it one more time just to get a little more browning on this side, and then I take it off and add it to the stack that I keep covered with tea towels. Don't feel like you have to use your hands to flip it. I'm used to it now, that it just doesn't bother me, but use a flipper if that's the way you want to go. So it really does not need very long on the third side. At this point, it should start puffing up a little bit, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't puff. Sometimes they puff, sometimes they don't. Depends on how well you knead it. I think it has to do with how well it's kneaded, not with how much baking powder you put in it. Because I got a really good puff one time, and I didn't even add baking powder to it. So I just want to have it on this side long enough to pick up a little bit more color, and then it's done. So there you go. Just enough color so you can see it puffing up again. But this will go on the pile with the rest of them and get covered with a tea towel. And that's it. I will show you another one, and then at that point I'm just going to plow through these and get them done. And as a hint, if you are rolling out your dough and you find it is springing back on you a lot, you didn't rest it long enough. That's just what that means. It just wasn't rested long enough. So you can give it a little bit more time. You can fight with it, or you can just give it more time. If you're in a hurry and you want to fight with it, that's fine. Just make a note that next time you need to rest it a little longer. So this is how the tortillas turn out. They are nice and soft. They fold up nicely. They are really pillowy, soft, and warm. They're just so good when they're at this nice fresh stage. So I hope you give them a try. If you're looking for a use for these, I like to use these to make breakfast burritos. I meal prep a whole bunch of breakfast burritos, so you can find that video in the show notes and linked above. Thanks for watching.